Let me paint you a picture. So here we are, it's 2026. Leadership has officially surpassed burnout and salary as the number one concern for U.S. employers. 72% of HR professionals report that workers have higher expectations than ever before. And here's the problem: leaders aren't just struggling to meet those expectations. Most of them don't even realize they're failing. We all think we know ourselves. We all think we're the exception. But the data says otherwise. A large-scale survey found that 95% of people think they're self-aware, but really, only 10 to 15% actually are. That means 85 to 90% of the people you work with, and maybe even you, do not accurately understand how their behaviors impact those around them. Today, we're smashing the illusion and picking up the pieces. It's time to look in the mirror, folks. And it all starts now on Engage and Inspire. Well, hello, my fellow leaders. Welcome back to another episode of Engage and Inspire. I am your host, Scott Liles. I've coached leaders who could read balance sheets like a poet and strategists who could see market trends 3 years out. But put them in a room with their own team and they are completely blind to the impact they're having. They think they're being direct, but their team hears dismissive. They think they're being strategic, but their team hears, "You don't care about our input." And here's the kicker. Research shows that a leader's lack of self-awareness doesn't just hurt feelings. It negatively impacts decision-making, collaboration, and conflict management across the entire organization. Ineffective communication alone costs U.S. organizations up to $1.2 trillion annually. That breaks out to about $12,506 per employee. Let me give you some other interesting details. When asked about AI communication, which is a hot topic in every workplace right now, 69% of C-suite executives claim their companies communicated clearly about it. You know what percentage of entry-level employees agreed? Just 12%. That's not a gap, my friends. That is a chasm. Research from Gallup reveals that 99% of leaders believe they communicate change effectively, yet 1 in 4 employees disagree. Even more concerning, 89% of managers believe their people are thriving, while only 24% of employees actually report feeling that way. Today, we're closing that massive chasm. We're talking about developing self-awareness. It's going to get a little uncomfortable, but I promise it's going to change how you lead. Now, before we dive into the deep end, I want to give a huge shout out to a company that's helped us look good while we do the hard work. If you're a leader, you know that confidence matters. And sometimes you need armor. You need gear that says, "I've got this," before you even open your mouth. That's where Pins and Aces come in. This is a Colorado-based company, and they are doing something special in the golf and lifestyle space. Pins and Aces started with a simple mission: fill a gap in the market for expensive, high-quality gear that stands out from the crowd. And here's the part I really love. They are committed to American-made production, manufacturing many of their products right here in the USA and creating jobs as they grow. We're not just talking about hats, though their hats are sharp. We're talking about performance polos, unique club head covers that actually make a statement, premium golf bags, custom ball markers, and the list goes on. Whether you're on the course or in the clubhouse, this is gear built for the modern leader who appreciates craftsmanship. Right now, the team at Pins and Aces is offering a special deal just for my Engage and Inspire listeners. You can get 21% off your first order when you use code HELM at checkout. That's HELM. So go to pinsandaces.com, load up your cart with all their cool stuff, and before you hit checkout, make sure you use my discount code HELM, HELM, at checkout for that 21% off. All right, let's get into it. Self-awareness. It sounds soft, right? Like something you'd read in a wellness blog. But I want to tell you, it is the hardest edge of leadership. You cannot fix a problem you refuse to see. You cannot inspire people you refuse to understand. I call this the leader's mirror because it forces you to look at the gap between your intention and your impact. Now, let me hit you with some hard data here that should stop you right in your tracks. Now, we already mentioned that only 10 to 15% of people are truly self-aware, but here's another one. Studies show that there is less than a 30% correlation between people's actual competence and how they perceive their own competence. That means most of us are walking around with a wildly inflated view of our own abilities. So let's break this down by specific leadership behaviors. So, listening skills. 74% of managers believe they listen well, but only 34% of employees feel heard. When it comes to recognition, 83% of executives believe they recognize employees for their work, but only 43% of employees agree. Now, as far as trust, 55% of leaders believe their employees trusted them, while only 37% of employees felt this trust. And finally, decision quality. 57% of senior executives rate their decision-making highly, but only 20% of employees believe their organization's strategy decisions are high quality. These aren't small discrepancies, my friend. They are a systematic overestimation that affects performance, retention, innovation, and culture. In fact, a major statistical analysis of 114 studies found that for a complex work, the kind of leadership work you do every day, the correlation between self-estimated and actual performance drops to around 0.2%. That's essentially proving that there are leaders out there that are just taking a wild random guess. And get this, other people's judgments about us are actually better predictors of our behavior than our own judgments. A meta-analysis of over 44,000 individuals found that ratings from colleagues and observers consistently outperformed self-ratings in predicting actual job performance. Why is that? It's because we all have blind spots, and the higher you rise, the bigger those blind spots get. Now, here's something fascinating from recent 2026 data. Researchers analyzing 48 million employee sentiment responses found something they're calling, quote, the manager paradox, end quote. Managers have become 7.6% more self-aware about their personal impact over the past year. That's the good news. They're more conscious of how they show up. Now, here's the paradox. While becoming more self-aware, they've simultaneously become 2.69% less capable of resolving team conflict. They know themselves better, but they're losing the ability to manage team dynamics. This isn't a contradiction. It's a mismatch between personal development and the skills this moment demands. Self-awareness without action is just novel gazing. Let's talk about what this cost. So beyond the $1.2 trillion in communication costs, low self-awareness shows up in turnover. The construction industry, for example, faces 47% turnover rates, and researchers link this directly to leaders who lack self-awareness, unintentionally creating cultures people want to leave. In hospitality and tourism, scientists found that customer gratitude significantly boosts employee behavior, but only when leaders create conditions where that gratitude can flow. Self-aware leaders elevate both public self-awareness, which is how the employees represent the organization, and private self-awareness, which is how employees improve themselves. Here's where it gets really interesting and a little scary. Neuroscientific research shows that as a person's power rises, the activity of mirror neurons drops. Mirror neurons are the cells that fire when we perform an action and when we watch someone else perform it. They're the biological bias for empathy. So, layman's translation, leaders can grow neurologically less responsive to each other. The brain literally rewires itself to be less empathetic. Add that to the toxic cauldron of digital dopamine, the constant pings, likes, and notifications that keep us in reactive mode, and you've got a recipe for leaders who are isolated, distracted, and fundamentally unaware. When everyone around you says, "Great job," your brain stops looking for disconfirming evidence. According to research tracking workplace communication patterns, only 16% of employees say their last conversation with their manager was, quote, extremely meaningful, end quote. That means 84% of manager-employee conversations are essentially performative, creating an elaborate information blackout. Less than half of organizations, around 43%, offer regular conversations or communications between leaders and employees. When communication does happen, it's often one way, meaning leaders develop a message and cascade them down to their employees without any feedback loop. You develop what researchers call the, quote, CEO bubble, end quote. This is when you insulate yourself from candid feedback that leaves you believing you're a model of self-awareness while your team rolls their eyes behind closed doors. Recent research from the Irish Management Institute analyzing their largest data set of leadership self-assessments found something crucial. Awareness is high, but application is low. Leaders score themselves strongly on self-awareness, particularly around emotional intelligence and personal resilience. But when asked about applying advanced leadership techniques or adapting styles to different contexts, competence falls. Leaders know what good looks like, but many struggle to turn insight into action. This is what I call the, quote, knowing-doing gap, end quote. And it's the difference between someone who reads about leadership and someone who actually leads. So, how do we climb out of this hole? I'm glad you asked. There's a tool I want to give you today, and it's called the ladder of inference. And it was developed by a Harvard professor. I'm going to try not to butcher this name, but it's Emeritus Chris Argyris. Imagine a ladder leaning against a wall, and it's sitting in a puddle. That puddle is reality. All the data, all the facts, everything that's available in any given situation. Now, here's how we climb the ladder without even realizing it. Now, there's 5 rungs to this ladder. The first rung is select data. Your brain can't process everything, so it filters. You notice some things and ignore others based on your past experiences and bias. Rung 2 is where you add meaning. You push that selected data through the lens of your worldview. You interpret. You start assigning good or bad to what you've observed. Rung 3 is where you make assumptions. You fill in the gaps and you assume you know why someone said what they said or did what they did. The 4th rung is where you start drawing conclusions. Your assumptions solidify into conclusions, and from where you stand, these conclusions feel like facts. And then the 5th rung is where you start adopting beliefs. Over time, these conclusions become part of your belief system. They shape how you see the world going forward. But here's the problem. By the time you reach the top of the ladder, you've forgotten you ever selected data at all. You think you're dealing with objective reality when in fact you're dealing with a highly filtered, interpreted, assumption-laden version of it. This is what Daniel Kahneman calls System 1 thinking. It's fast, automatic, and completely unaware of the shortcuts that it's taking. Now let's talk about emotional intelligence, because self-awareness is the foundation of EQ. Recent research on 1,499 working professionals found that higher EQ aligns with higher job performance and higher salary bands. Now here's the financial impact. A 20% increase in EQ, which is about 8 points on their scale, corresponds to roughly $15,000 to $20,000 more in annual earnings, which compounds to nearly $500,000 over a 30-year career. And here's what's fascinating. Across these 4 EQ skill areas, which is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management showed the strongest association with job performance and salary outcomes. But why is that? Because it bundles real workplace behavior. So the conflicts, the feedback, the trust collaboration, just throws them all together. Another study of 1,393 professionals found that higher EQ correlated strongly with using a decision-making process and accurately assessing the outcomes of decisions. Self-management and social awareness were especially strongly correlated to good decision-making. Self-management helps decision-makers regulate their emotions, and social awareness helps them take their impact on others into account. So the good news here, self-awareness can be built and rebuilt. You see, the brain's plasticity works both ways. If power can rewire us for less empathy, intentional practice can rewire us for more. University of Phoenix research emphasizes that emotional intelligence is not a soft skill. It is a structural leadership capability that influences trust, psychological safety, and long-term organizational effectiveness. When leaders are equipped to recognize emotional dynamics and respond intentionally, they can reduce preventable strain and create conditions where people are more engaged, resilient, and are able to perform at their best. And here are 3 exercises that you can start today. So, exercise 1, the feedback 180. If you want to know who you are as a leader, don't look at your LinkedIn profile. Look at your team's body language when you walk in the room. Do their shoulders relax? Do they tense up? Do they avoid you, or do they urgently seek your mentorship and guidance? Exercise 2 is to find your blind spotters. You need people who will tell you the truth, not people who agree with you. Find the one person who makes you a little uncomfortable and ask them this question. What is one thing I do that gets in my own way? And then, this is the hard part, don't defend it. Let them say what they have to say, and then you just say, thank you. Consider General George Marshall during World War II. He was famously intolerant of yes men. He once told his senior staff, quote, "Gentlemen, I'm disappointed in you. You haven't disagreed with a single decision I've made." End quote. He knew that unchallenged thinking was dangerous. And exercise 3 is apply the latter. Next time you find yourself absolutely certain about something, especially something negative about a colleague or a situation, stop. Climb back down the ladder into that puddle and ask yourself, what data did I select? What assumptions did I make? What might I be missing? Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, practices a kind of, quote, healthy paranoia, end quote. consistently scanning for blind spots. He pairs that with an open door policy and his famous Heartland tours to avoid the executive echo chamber. And when his own child overheard him berating a colleague on the phone and asked, "Dad, why are you so angry?" he listened. That simple question cut through, and it cut deep. Self-awareness isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. And people will follow a real leader over a perfect leader every single time. We talk a lot on this show about translating intention into action. And that theme is exactly what I explore in my book, How Can I Help? It's a question we ask all the time, but if we're not careful, it can become hollow, just something we say to sound nice. In the book, I dig into how to move from asking, "How can I help?" as a reflex to actually understanding the person in front of you and providing the support they genuinely need. It's about service, leadership, and connection. Now, if you want to dive deeper into becoming the kind of leader people want to engage with, go pick up a copy of How Can I Help right now. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble, or you can download it instantly for your Kindle. Pick up a copy today, read it, and let me know what you think. All right, here's your challenge for the week. Before you react to a situation, before you send that email or walk into that meeting, stop, take a deep breath, look in the mirror. Ask yourself, is my intention matching my impact? Remember the research, only 10 to 15% of us are truly self-aware. But the good news is awareness is a skill. It can be practiced. It can be built. It starts with the courage to ask the hard questions and the humility to hear the answers. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a second to rate the show, leave a comment, like it, share it with a leader who needs to hear it, share it with a friend, a family member. Let's get this message out there to the world. And until next time, remember, keep engaging and keep inspiring. Take care.